I want to go now to the former medical advisor to the George W. Bush White House, Dr. Jonathan Reiner, and Josh Rogin, who has reported extensively on the origins of the virus, and we have a lot of news about that tonight. He's also the author of Chaos Under Heaven, Trump, Xi, and the Battle for the 21st Century. Dr. Reiner, let me start with you. So these mask mandates, I mean, you heard Alabama obviously respond that they're, forget it, we're doing what we're going to do. We're not putting the mask back on. Cities and states across this country are dropping mask mandates and pushing ahead with reopening, right? Now, maybe some of the blue states are not as far ahead as the red states, but they're all doing the same thing directionally. They're all saying, we're done. But President Biden is saying reinstate. You heard Dr. Walensky. She's worried about impending doom. Are we too far down the reopening road, though, for really anyone to turn back?
No, I don't think so. First of all, we have a federal government now that reacts to the facts as they are, not as they would like them to be. Only a fool doesn't change course when the road ahead is untenable. So, sure, at the beginning of March, when every single state was down and it looked like the virus was just disappearing imminently, it made sense in some places to maybe relax some of these safeguards. But now, with virus surging again in various parts of the country, it's important to reconsider what we are doing. And the prudent move now is for states that are surging, and again, this is happening all over the United States, to reevaluate what they are doing and change course. Okay. The easiest thing to do is masking. It can be done. It's not too late. And I think Dr. Walensky did a great job today at speaking from the heart. I really admired that. She
certainly did. I mean, it was clear that that was what she felt, emotionally, and she went off script. It was important. You did also hear, though, Dr. Reiner, Dr. Birx, right, telling Sanjay that she thinks 450,000 Americans could still be alive, right? She said mitigated or decreased substantially in terms of death. So, what do you make of that, though? I mean, she was there the whole time along for the ride.
Well, she wasn't just along for the ride. She was in the bridge. She was the White House pandemic coordinator. She just wasn't a passenger on the ship. And, there were multiple mistakes that that the prior administration made. A catastrophic mistake with almost a 2-month delay in testing. And then this whole nonsense with politicizing masks. And then allowing the states to bypass all of the really good advice from the CDC on how to open, right? Yet she and her colleagues were largely silent. She was even silent when the president essentially replaced her with Dr. Scott Atlas, who was really brought on to initiate this concept of letting the virus burn through the community with a modified herd immunity. She was even silent then. She was silent. She was silent when this country needed to know the truth, when the country needed to know that masks were not optional, that testing was important, that we weren't doing too much testing, that we had to keep shut down until it was safe to open. She was silent, and so were most of her colleagues, with the exception, to a certain extent, of Tony Fauci.
Right, and that is true. So let me ask you, Josh, in this context, it really matters where this came from for so many reasons, right? One of them, though, I keep saying, is that this virus really could be what cements, the change in economic superpower, military superpower, and everything else on this planet. And tonight, a draft report from the World Health Organization states that an animal, not a lab in Wuhan, was likely the source of the deadly pandemic, right? A naturally occurring virus from an animal to a person, right? As opposed to a leak from the lab. Now, I just want to say, Josh, so everyone knows what you know, Chinese scientists reportedly helped write the WHO report. The New York Times says half of the scientists who wrote it were Chinese scientists, most of whom hold official positions or work for the government. That is half the people that wrote the report are in that category. The World Health Organization, obviously, all the way along has not been critical of China. The WHO director, we all remember back last February, tweeting to congratulate the government of China for its cooperation and transparency, which might be the biggest load of baloney that came out of all of this at the official level. Can the U.S. trust the WHO, Josh, to have the final say on whether this virus came from a Chinese lab?
No. Listen, it's a tragedy of this pandemic that, in addition to the politicization of masks and testing and hydrochloroquine, that the origin story, the drive to find out how we got here, how this happened, so that we can prevent the next pandemic, has become horrendously politicized. And the WHO fatally flawed investigation, study group, whatever you want to call it, and its fatally flawed report is just the latest example of that, and it's a darn shame. And don't take my word for it. Secretary of State Tony Blinken, who is not a pro-Trump conspiracy theorist, Tony Blinken said, we've got real concerns about the methodology and the process that went into the report, including the fact that the government in Beijing apparently helped to write it. Okay, so it's not surprising that it toes the Chinese Communist Party's line. It's not surprising that they actually put out the information 2 weeks ago in the Chinese state propaganda media. And it's not surprising that the WHO investigators, who are the best friends of the people in the lab, say it couldn't have possibly come from the lab, even though they didn't even investigate the lab. Okay, so we actually learned nothing new from the new report. It does muddy the water further, and it actually places the Biden administration in a terrible position because they want more information about the labs. They've confirmed some of the Trump administration's claims about suspicious activity at the lab, sick researchers, and the WHO report either ignores or denies that. So now we have a big problem that the WHO report and the Biden administration are really in conflict, and we need the Chinese government to put out more information and the Biden administration to put out more information as well.
It is pretty incredible because as the course of history turns, you know, how this all started, it's not just going to be something that's interesting for general historical purposes. Like it truly may have just much greater impact. Thank you both so very much. I appreciate